Can we be sad together? When 7-year-old's words broke her widowed dad's heart, the alarm clock's red digits burned through the darkness. 47 a.m. Matthew Coleman had been awake for the past hour, lying perfectly still, afraid that if he moved, if he acknowledged the empty space beside him, the reality would crash down again. 3 months, 92 days since Rebecca's funeral, 92 mornings of reaching across cold sheets. But this morning was different. This was the first morning without the cushion of condolence casseroles, without his sister staying over, without the excuse of bereavement leave. This was the first morning of their new life. Just him and Sophie. The house held its breath in the pre-dawn quiet. Even the old oak outside their bedroom window, the one Rebecca used to say, whispered secrets to her, stood silent. Matthew finally turned his head toward her pillow. Her reading glasses still perched on the nightstand, marking her place in a romance novel she'd never finish. The bookmark, a photo strip from a carnival booth, 4 frames of them, laughing Sophie as a baby between them, peeked out from page 247. He should get up, check on Sophie, make breakfast, do something, anything. Instead, he reached for Rebecca's pillow, pulling it close, breathing in the fading scent of her lavender shampoo. How many more mornings before even this disappeared? A sound from down the hall, soft, muffled. Matthew bolted upright. Sophie's room. He padded barefoot across the cold hardwood, the October chill seeping through the old Victorian's bones. Sophie's door stood ajar, morning light just beginning to creep through her butterfly curtains. The bed was empty. Sophie? His voice cracked on her name. Sophie, honey. The panic rose fast, irrational but overwhelming. Where was she? Had she run away? Was she hurt? He yanked open the closet door and his heart stopped. There, curled in the corner beneath Rebecca's old coats, the one Sophie had insisted they move to her closet, lay his daughter. She was awake, eyes wide and glassy, clutching her mother's emerald green cardigan like a lifeline. The one Rebecca wore during chemo, the one that still carried the shape of her shoulders. Oh, baby. Matthew's knees protested as he folded himself down beside her. Sophie didn't move, didn't acknowledge him. Just stared at nothing, fingers working the cardigan's buttons. Open, closed, open, closed. A repetitive motion that broke his heart. Bad dream. A tiny nod. Want to talk about it. She shook her head then in a voice so small he almost missed it. I dreamed she came back. But when I woke up, her voice dissolved. Matthew gathered her into his arms, this slip of a girl who carried her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin. She was all bones and sharp angles, 7 years old, but trying to carry the weight of the world. Or at least the weight of his grief, along with her own. I know, he whispered into her tangled hair. I know, baby. I dream about her too. They sat there as the room brightened incrementally, dust motes beginning their lazy dance in the strengthening sun. Finally, Sophie pulled back, swiping at her face with the cardigan sleeve. It's picture day, she said suddenly as if remembering something crucial. Mom always did my hair special for picture day. Matthew's stomach sank. Picture day. Of course. Rebecca would have known, would have picked out the perfect outfit weeks ago, practiced elaborate hairstyles from Pinterest, made it an event. He didn't even know what picture day meant beyond the obvious. We'll figure it out, he said with false confidence. What did Mom usually do? Sophie's face crumpled. French braids, with the little sparkly clips, the ones that look like butterflies. She touched her hair self-consciously. She said they made me look like a fairy princess. French braids. Matthew could barely manage a regular ponytail. YouTube, he thought desperately. YouTube had to have tutorials. Okay, French braids it is. But first breakfast. What sounds good? Pancakes, Sophie said automatically, then caught herself. But not, you don't have to. Cereal is fine. Because pancakes were Rebecca's Sunday tradition. Blueberry pancakes shaped like hearts and stars with faces made of chocolate chips. Matthew had tried once about a month ago. The smoke alarm had screamed for 10 minutes, and Sophie had eaten cold cereal while he scraped charred batter off Rebecca's favorite pan. No, he said firmly. Pancakes. We're doing pancakes. 20 minutes later, the kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour dusted every surface. Eggshells littered the counter. The first batch, attempted hearts that looked more like diseased kidneys, lay smoking in the sink. Sophie sat at the breakfast bar, still wearing her mother's cardigan over her pajamas, watching him with an expression caught between amusement and pity. Dad, she said gently, maybe we should just— No, I can do this. Your mom left the recipe right. He spun around, scanning through the chaos. Here, her recipe box. Rebecca's handwriting, loopy and cheerful, decorated the index card. Coleman family famous pancakes. She'd drawn little hearts in the corners. At the bottom, in different ink, clearly added later. Matthew, where the secret is patience, low and slow. Don't rush the flip, love you. His vision blurred. When had she written that addition, knowing him, knowing he'd need this dad? Sophie had materialized beside him, her small hands slipping into his. Mom knew you'd try to make them. That's why she wrote that. How do you— She told me, when she was in the hospital. She said— Sophie's voice wavered. She said you'd try to do everything perfect for me, but that it was okay if things weren't perfect. That different could be good too. The second batch came out better. Not hearts or stars, but recognizable circles. Sophie helped, standing on Rebecca's stepping stool, carefully pouring batter while Matthew managed the heat. They were lopsided, slightly burnt around the edges, but they were pancakes. They're pancakes. These are actually pretty good, Sophie said through a mouthful, and Matthew couldn't tell if she was lying. Your mom's recipe, he said. Hard to mess up. Sophie went quiet, pushing a piece around her plate. She left something else. Matthew's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? In my room. Hidden. She said to wait until we really needed it, until the first really hard day. Sophie met his eyes. I think today is a really hard day. She led him back to her room, to her bookshelf, crammed with Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume. Behind Charlotte's Web, she pulled out an envelope, Rebecca's handwriting again, for my brave adventurers. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a hand-drawn map of their house. My darlings, if you're reading this, then you're having one of those days where the world feels too heavy. I know there will be many of these days, and I wish I could be there to make them lighter. But here's a secret. I am there. I've left pieces of myself, lessons and love, hidden throughout our home. Think of it as a treasure hunt, one that will help you both remember that love doesn't end just because someone is gone. Your first clue is where we always began our mornings together. All my love, Mom, Rebecca, P.S. Matthew, honey, you're going to want to rush through this. Don't, one treasure at a time. Sophie knows the rules. Sophie was crying quietly, clutching the letter. Matthew pulled her close, his own tears falling freely now. She planned this, he asked. Sophie nodded against his chest. When she got really sick, the last month, she made me help sometimes when you were at work. She said it was our secret mission. The first clue led them to the coffee shower where Rebecca always started her day. Taped underneath was a small envelope and a USB drive. Lesson 1, how to French braid. Yes, Matthew, I know you're panicking about picture day. The USB contained a video. Rebecca, thin but smiling, demonstrating on a practice mannequin head. But more than instructions, it was her voice, her laugh when she messed up her, "Oh, Sophie's going to laugh at Mommy's crooked braid." At the end, she looked directly at the camera. Matthew, you're going to be terrible at this at first. That's okay. Sophie, be patient with Daddy. And remember, it's not about perfect hair. It's about the time you spend together, the gentle moments. Those are what matter. They watched it 3 times, Sophie laughing through tears at her mother's jokes. Matthew memorizing every movement, every word, every frame of Rebecca's face. Then they practiced. On Sophie's dolls first, then on Sophie herself. 40 minutes and several attempts later, Sophie had something resembling French braids. They were loose in places, somewhat crooked, but decorated with the butterfly clips Rebecca had mentioned. How do I look? Sophie asked, gazing at herself in the mirror. Like a fairy princess, Matthew said truthfully. A bit of a warrior fairy princess who's been on an adventure, but definitely a princess. Sophie smiled, the first real smile he'd seen in weeks. Mom would say that's even better than a regular princess. The drive to school was quiet, but not the suffocating silence of recent weeks. Sophie hummed something, a song Rebecca used to sing. Matthew recognized it, "You Are My Sunshine." He joined in, his voice rough, but trying, and Sophie's hand found his over the gear shift. At the school drop-off, chaos reigned. Parents in various stages of morning dishevelment deposited children like colorful packages. Matthew watched other fathers, seemingly effortless in their routines, high-fiving their kids, joking with other parents. He stood apart, uncertain of the protocol. Did he walk Sophie and wait until she was inside? What had Rebecca done, Mr. Coleman? He turned to find Grace Hendrick, the neighbor from 3 houses down. She was one of the few people who hadn't tried to force casseroles and platitudes on them. Her son Ben stood beside her backpack, dragging on the ground. Grace, hi. Picture day, huh? She smiled kindly, taking in Sophie's slightly askew braids. You did those yourself. Dad watched a video, Sophie announced. Mom made it for him. Grace's expression softened. Your mom was always thinking ahead. Ben, why don't you walk Sophie to class? I need to talk to Mr. Coleman for a minute. The kids wandered off, Ben chattering about something involving Pokemon. Grace watched them go, then turned back to Matthew. I wanted to tell you something, she said. When Robert died, my husband, 2 years ago, I couldn't even get Ben dressed for the first month. His teacher sent home a note because he wore the same shirt 4 days in a row, the same unwashed shirt. Matthew didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. What I'm trying to say is you're doing great. The braids, the being here, the trying, it matters. Even when it feels like you're failing, you're not. It doesn't feel like enough, he admitted. It never does. But look, she pointed to where Sophie and Ben had stopped to examine something in the garden. Sophie was gesturing animatedly, her sadness temporarily forgotten. She's still finding moments of joy. That's because of you, because you're showing up. Rebecca was better at this. At all of it? Grace laughed, but not unkindly. You know what Robert was better at than me? Everything involving Ben. Sports homework, bedtime stories. But you know what Ben and I figured out our own way? Different, maybe less polished, but ours. The bell rang and children began streaming into the building. Sophie ran back, threw her arms around Matthew's waist. Love you, Daddy. Thank you for the braids. Love you too, Princess. I'll be right here at 3. Promise? He knelt down to her eye level. Promise, right here. 3 o'clock. She studied his face, then nodded and ran inside. Matthew stood there until the doors closed, until the parking lot emptied, until it was just him in the October morning. The house, when he returned, felt like a tomb. Rebecca's presence was everywhere and nowhere. Her coffee mug on the kitchen table, her jacket on the coat rack, her handwriting on the calendar. Sophie dentist in 2 weeks, date night, which on a Friday that had come and gone without celebration. He should work. His laptop sat open on the dining room table, emails accumulating. The engineering firm had been patient, but patience had limits. Instead, he found himself in their bedroom opening Rebecca's closet. Her clothes hung like ghosts of better days. The red dress from their anniversary dinner last year. The Columbia sweatshirt she'd stolen from him in college and never returned. Her wedding dress preserved in plastic, a relic from a day when, till death do us part, seemed like a distant promise, not an imminent threat. At the bottom of the closet, behind shoes and forgotten handbags, he found a box. Not the treasure hunt box, something else. Rebecca's journals. He'd known she kept them, but had never read them. It felt like a violation even now, but he was desperate for her voice, her thoughts, anything. He opened the most recent one, dated just a month before she died. October 3rd. Matthew found me crying today. I told him it was the pain, but really it was Sophie's school calendar. All those events I won't see. Picture day, Christmas concert, graduation. Both 8th grade and high school and college. But I can't think like that. I have to focus on what I can control. The treasure hunt is almost ready. 16 clues, 16 lessons. Sophie helped me hide the last one today. She's so brave, my girl. Braver than me. I worry about Matthew. He loves so hard, but doesn't know how to bend without breaking. I see him trying to be strong, trying to hold us all together, but he needs to learn it's okay to fall apart. That's what I'm hoping the hunt will teach him. Not just how to braid hair or make pancakes, but how to be vulnerable with Sophie. How to let her see him grieve. They'll need to hold each other up. Sometimes I dream that I get better, that this is all a terrible mistake. I wake up and for a moment I forget. Then I see Matthew's face, the careful hope he tries to hide, and I remember. I'm leaving them. I'm leaving them. And there's nothing I can do except try to leave enough of myself behind to help them through. God, let it be enough. Matthew closed the journal, unable to read more. He lay back on the bed on Rebecca's side, staring at the ceiling. The tears came then, great gulping sobs that shook the bed. He cried for Rebecca, for Sophie, for himself, for the future they'd planned and lost, for the treasure hunt that was both a gift and a reminder of everything they'd never have again. His phone buzzed. Work. He let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again and again. The third time he looked. Not work. The school. Mr. Coleman, this is Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse. Sophie is fine, but she's having a bit of a hard time. Could you come? He broke every speed limit getting there. Sophie sat in the nurse's office, her face blotchy from crying, the French braids now decidedly lopsided. When she saw him, fresh tears started. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I tried to be brave. Oh, baby, no. He scooped her up, and she wrapped herself around him like a koala. You don't have to be brave. What happened? Mrs. Patterson, a grandmotherly woman with kind eyes, explained. Picture day. The photographer asked her to smile, and she just couldn't. Started crying and couldn't stop. It happens especially with grieving children. Everyone saw, Sophie mumbled into his shoulder. Everyone knows I'm the girl whose mom died. Is that such a bad thing? Matthew asked softly. Your mom was pretty amazing. Being known as her daughter seems like a good thing to me. Sophie pulled back to look at him. But it makes people weird. They look at me like I'm broken. Are you broken? She thought about it. Maybe a little. Me too, Matthew admitted. But you know what broken thing can still be beautiful. Mom taught me that. Remember the vase in the living room? The one with the gold lines? Sophie nodded. It was a Japanese piece, kintsugi, Rebecca had called it. Broken pottery repaired with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful than the original. We're like that vase, he said. We're broken right now, but we're going to put ourselves back together. And the gold part's the parts that hold us together. That's going to be all the love Mom left for us. All the memories, all the lessons, even the treasure hunts. You know about the treasures? She told me about them in her journal. Want to go find the next one? Sophie shook her head. Not yet. Mom said one at a time, when we really need them. Okay, then what do you need right now? Sophie considered. Ice cream, and maybe we could look at pictures, the old ones, when Mom was healthy. That sounds perfect. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I'll mark her present for picture day. The photographer will be here next month for makeups. Walking out, Sophie's hand in his, Matthew felt something shift. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the beginning of learning how to carry the weight together. At home, they sat on the couch with 3 photo albums and a pint of mint chocolate chip, Rebecca's favorite. They laughed at baby Sophie covered in spaghetti, at Matthew's unfortunate beard phase, at Rebecca attempting to build IKEA furniture while 7 months pregnant. Look, Sophie pointed to a photo from last Christmas. Mom looks happy. She did. Even thin, even tired, Rebecca glowed with joy. They'd known by then the diagnosis was terminal, but in that photo decorating cookies with Sophie, she looked timeless. She was happy, Matthew said. She had you. She had us. Dad, Sophie snuggled closer. I'm sad she's gone, but I'm glad she was my mom, even if it was only for 7 years. Matthew kissed the top of her head, breathing in her strawberry shampoo smell. Me too, baby. Me too. As afternoon faded to evening, they made dinner together. Just spaghetti, nothing fancy. Sophie stood on the stool stirring the sauce while Matthew boiled the pasta. They ate at the dinner table, Rebecca's chair empty, but somehow not as accusatory as before. Tomorrow's Saturday, Sophie said through a mouthful of spaghetti. Mom always made waffles on Saturday. Want to try? Matthew asked. Fair warning, they might turn out like the pancakes. That's okay. Different can be good, right? Right. That night, tucking Sophie in, Matthew noticed she'd moved the cardigan from the closet to her bed, folded carefully on the extra pillow. For when I miss her at night, Sophie explained. Good idea. He sat on the edge of her bed. Story. The one about how you met Mom. It was her favorite, and Matthew had told it 100 times, but tonight it felt different. Sacred almost. I was at the college library studying for my engineering final. It was raining and I was grumpy because I'd forgotten my umbrella. Your mom walked in soaking wet, carrying the biggest stack of art history books I'd ever seen. She dropped them right in front of my table. Boom, and said, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance." Sophie finished giggling. And I was so flustered I knocked over my coffee, and it went everywhere. All over my notes, my textbook, her shoes. And she said, "I guess we're even on the dramatic entrances." Then she helped me clean up, and we talked until the library closed. And then you walked her home under her umbrella. She'd brought an umbrella. Of course she had. Your mom was always prepared. Except she wasn't prepared to fall in love with a grumpy engineering student. Matthew smiled. No, that surprised us both. Sophie yawned. I'm glad you found the map. What map? The one Mom drew. Of the house. With all the treasures. When did she have time to do all that? Sophie's eyes were already closing. When she couldn't sleep. She said the pain kept her awake, so she'd plan treasures for us. She said it made the pain worth something. Matthew sat there long after Sophie's breathing evened out. Rebecca had spent her last weeks in pain, planning ways to ease their pain. It was so perfectly her that it broke his heart all over again. He wandered the house, seeing it differently now. Not just rooms and furniture, but a map of hidden love. How many treasures waited? How many lessons? How many moments of Rebecca's voice, her wisdom, her presence? In the kitchen, he found himself making tea in Rebecca's favorite mug. Earl Grey the way she liked it. He sat at the table where she used to grade her students' art projects, where they'd planned Sophie's birthday parties, where she'd told him about the diagnosis. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. Tomorrow they'd make waffles. They'd probably burn them. Sophie would help, and they'd laugh and maybe cry a little too. They'd be broken and beautiful, held together with gold. Saturday arrived wrapped in fog, the kind that turned their Portland neighborhood into something from a fairy tale. Matthew woke to find Sophie already in the kitchen, standing on her stool, Rebecca's recipe box open before her. Waffles, she announced seriously. Mom's recipe says we need buttermilk. Do we have buttermilk? Sophie's face fell. I don't know. Mom always had it. They searched the refrigerator together, finding expired yogurt, 3 types of mustard, and a container of something that might have once been leftover Chinese food. No buttermilk. Google says we can make it, Sophie said already on the iPad. Milk and lemon juice. Mom would improvise like that. She was right. Rebecca had been the queen of substitutions, making magic from whatever was on hand. Matthew measured milk while Sophie squeezed lemons, her tongue poking out in concentration. Dad, she stirred the mixture carefully. Do you think Mom knew we'd run out of buttermilk? What do you mean, Mom? Well, she planned everything else. Maybe this is part of it. Learning to figure things out ourselves. The waffles surprisingly turned out decent. Not Rebecca's golden perfection, but crispy outside, fluffy inside. They ate them drowning in syrup, and Sophie declared them different good. After breakfast, Sophie disappeared into her room. Matthew heard drawers opening, closet doors sliding. When she emerged, she was wearing one of Rebecca's old paint-splattered shirts over her clothes. Art project, she explained. Mom left supplies in the garage. I found them last week but wasn't ready. The garage had been Rebecca's studio space, converted from Matthew's barely used workshop. He hadn't been able to enter it since she died. Sophie took his hand, leading him like she was the adult. Rebecca's easel still held a half-finished painting, a landscape of the coast where they had honeymooned in. Her brushes stood in mason jars waiting. The smell of oil paint and turpentine lingered so distinctly, Rebecca, that Matthew had to steady himself against the doorframe. Look, Sophie pointed to a table covered with a sheet. For us. Under the sheet, 2 fresh canvases, new brushes, tubes of acrylic paint, and another envelope. Lesson 2. Sometimes the best way to feel is to create. Paint what you can't say. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be yours. They painted for 2 hours side by side, not talking. Matthew didn't know what he was painting until it emerged. A tree stark and leafless against a storm-dark sky, but with tiny green shoots emerging from its trunk. Sophie painted their house, but with wings flying above clouds. At the bottom, 3 figures held hands. 2 solid, one translucent but smiling. That's beautiful, baby, Matthew said, his throat tight. Mom's still with us, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. Just different. Like how water becomes clouds, but it's still water. Grace knocked on the garage door around noon, Ben trailing behind her with a soccer ball. Sorry to interrupt. Ben was hoping Sophie might want to play. Sophie looked at Matthew uncertain. She hadn't played with friends since the funeral. Go ahead, he encouraged. I'll clean up here. The kids ran off and Grace lingered. How are you really doing? We're learning. Rebecca left us these treasure hunts, lessons hidden around the house. Grace smiled. That sounds like her. Always teaching even at the end. Did you know her well? We had coffee sometimes. She talked about you and Sophie constantly. She was worried about leaving you. Grace paused. She asked me to check on you. Not to be pushy, just available. She asked you. About a month before, she said Matthew's going to try to do everything alone, but he needs to learn it's okay to ask for help. She made me promise. Matthew felt tears threatening again. Would they ever stop ambushing him? She thought of everything. Not everything, Grace said gently, but enough. She trusted you to figure out the rest. That afternoon, while Sophie played with Ben in the backyard, Matthew found himself in Rebecca's closet again. Not the journals this time, but a box labeled important papers. Insurance documents, their will, her teaching credentials. At the bottom, a DVD labeled simply, for Matthew. He shouldn't watch it without Sophie. Or maybe he should watch it, first make sure it was appropriate. He compromised taking it to the living room but not playing it yet. Sophie came in grass-stained and smiling. Ben's mom invited us for dinner. Oh, that's nice, but we're not ready for normal things yet. Her perception startled him. Something like that. Mom would say we have to try. That hiding makes the sad bigger. She was right. Rebecca would say exactly that. Okay, dinner. Can we find another treasure first, I think? I think I need one today. They consulted Rebecca's map. The next clue was in the laundry room taped inside the dryer door. Lesson 3, life gets messy. Stains happen. Most things can be cleaned, but some marks become part of the fabric. That's okay, they tell our story. With it, a small key. I know what this opens. Sophie ran upstairs, Matthew following. In the master bedroom, she went straight to Rebecca's jewelry box. The key opened a hidden compartment at the bottom. Inside, 2 necklaces, each with half of a silver heart. When you're ready, wear this. 2 halves that make a whole, but each beautiful on its own. Remember, you're not broken. You're just learning a new shape. Sophie fastened hers immediately. Matthew pocketed his not ready yet, but moved beyond words. Dinner at Grace's was easier than expected. Her house was warm, lived in, comfortable with chaos. Ben chattered about school soccer, a lizard he'd found. Sophie slowly joined in, and by dessert she was laughing at Ben's impression of their principal. Can Sophie come to my soccer game tomorrow? Ben asked. She could meet the team. Sophie looked at Matthew. Could I? Sure, if you want to. Grace walked them home, the kids running ahead with flashlights making patterns in the darkness. Thank you, Matthew said, for pushing, for dinner, for being what Rebecca knew we'd need. She loved you both so much, Grace said. At the end, when the pain was bad, she'd tell me stories about you two. It helped her, I think, remembering the joy. What kind of stories? How Sophie performed a whole Broadway show for the neighborhood when she was 5. How you learned to sew to fix her favorite teddy bear. How you both surprised her with that anniversary trip to Paris, even though you hate flying. She told you about Paris. She told me you held her hand the entire flight. Both ways that you'd conquer any fear for her. Back home, Sophie in bed, Matthew finally played the DVD. Rebecca appeared on screen, thin but radiant, sitting in their bedroom. The date stamp showed 3 weeks before she died. Hi, my love. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone and you're struggling. I know you, Matthew Coleman. You're probably trying to be Superman, doing everything perfectly, not letting Sophie see you crack. Stop it. She needs to see you grieve. She needs to know it's okay to fall apart. You two have to do this together, not with you protecting her from pain. The pain is there whether you acknowledge it or not. I have so much to say and not enough time. So let me tell you the important things. 1, Sophie is stronger than you think. Trust her. 2, it's okay to be angry at me for leaving. I'm angry too. 3, you're going to make mistakes, burn dinners, forget school events, say the wrong thing. It's fine. I made mistakes too. Remember the time I forgot her at gymnastics? Or when I gave her food poisoning with that experimental casserole she survived? You both will. 4. Let people help. Grace especially. I chose her for a reason. 5. When you are ready, and you will know when, but then love again. I mean it, Matthew. You have too much love in you to bury it with me. Find someone who makes you laugh. Someone who gets Sophie. Someone who understands that loving me is part of loving you. 6. The treasures aren't just lessons, they're permission slips. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to be so. Permission to be happy again. I love you. I love our life. I love our daughter. I hate that I have to leave, but I'm so grateful for what we had. 8 years of marriage, 9 years together. Some people don't get that in a lifetime. Oh, and Matthew, that thing you do where you organize everything when you're stressed, the label maker incident of 2019. Sophie's gonna do that too. It's adorable. Let her. I love you. Did I say that already? I love you. Take care of our girl. Let her take care of you. And Matthew, it's okay to take the ring off when you're ready. I'll understand. The video ended. Matthew sat in the dark crying again, but differently this time. Not the desperate sobs of loss, but the gentle tears of acceptance. Rebecca had given him permission to grieve, to fail to live. Sunday came with rain, fitting for a soccer game. Sophie wore rain boots and Rebecca's old college raincoat, swimming in it, but refusing to wear anything else. I smell her, she explained simply. The soccer game was muddy chaos. 8-year-olds slipping, sliding, occasionally kicking the ball. Parents huddled under umbrellas shouting encouragement. Sophie stood pressed against Matthew's side, at first overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all. Then Ben scored a goal and pointed at Sophie, grinning. That was for you, for good luck. Sophie lit up, jumping and cheering. Other parents smiled at them, and Matthew realized they weren't looking at them with pity, but with warmth. They were being accepted back into the world of the living. After the game, Muddy Ben bounded over. Coach says we can have a team manager, someone to keep stats and stuff. Sophie could do it. I don't know about soccer, Sophie said hesitantly. That's okay. Neither does Coach. Ben laughed at his own joke. That evening, they found another treasure, this one in Matthew's toolbox. Lesson 4, building and fixing takes patience. Measure twice, cut once applies to life too. But sometimes you have to trust your instincts and just hammer away. Inside the toolbox, a new project kit, a birdhouse with plans drawn in Rebecca's hand. She loved birds, Sophie said softly. Remember the feeders everywhere. They built it together, Sophie reading instructions while Matthew cut and hammered. It wasn't perfect, slightly crooked, with one wall longer than the others, but it was theirs. Where should we hang it? Sophie asked. Where would Mom want it? Outside the kitchen window, where she could see it while doing dishes. As Matthew hung the birdhouse, Sophie suddenly said, I'm angry at her sometimes. He nearly dropped the hammer. What? Mom, I'm angry she left. I know she didn't want to, but I'm still mad. Is that bad? Matthew climbed down from the ladder, kneeling to face his daughter. No, baby, it's not bad. I'm angry too sometimes. You are bad. Yesterday I got mad because she didn't tell me where she kept the good scissors. Last week I was furious that she died right before your school play. Anger is part of missing someone. Oh, Sophie seemed relieved. Ben's mom said it's called stages of grief. We don't have to go in order. That night, Sophie asked to sleep in the big bed. They lay there, Rebecca's precedence somehow both overwhelming and comforting. Tell me a mom story, Sophie requested. One I don't know. Matthew thought. When you were born, you were so tiny. The nurses put you on Mom's chest, and you were crying and crying. Nothing helped. Then Mom started singing that silly song about the monkey and the weasel, and you just stopped, completely silent, like you recognized her voice from inside. She sang to me before I was born. Every night, whole concerts, Beatles, Broadway, even some Beyoncé. You were very cultured before birth. Sophie giggled. What else? She was terrified of being a mom. The night before you were born, she made me promise that if she was terrible at it, I'd tell her. She was the best mom. She was, but she didn't know that then. She learned as she went, just like we're learning now. Monday brought school again. Sophie wore her half-heart necklace openly, And when a classmate asked about it, she said simply, "It's part of my mom's heart. I'm keeping it safe." Matthew finally returned to work, laptop open at the kitchen table, trying to focus on structural equations, while surrounded by Rebecca's garden visible through the window, her handwriting on the calendar, her coffee mug he still couldn't bring himself to wash. His phone rang. The school. "Mr. Coleman, Sophie's fine, but there's been an incident. Could you come?" He found Sophie in the principal's office, small and defiant. A boy from her class sat across from her, holding his nose. "She hit me," the boy accused. "Sophie." Matthew couldn't hide his shock. "He said Mom killed herself because she didn't love me enough to stay." Sophie's eyes blazed with fury. The principal, Mrs. Martinez, sighed. "Tyler, that was cruel and untrue. Sophie hitting is never okay, no matter what someone says." Matthew's own anger flared, but he forced it down. "Sophie apologized for hitting." "But Dad, we don't hurt people with our hands. We use our words, even when their words hurt us first." Sophie deflated. "Sorry, Tyler." Tyler mumbled his own apology, and his mother led him away, shooting embarrassed looks back. In the car, Sophie burst into tears. "I know Mom didn't choose to die. I know that. But when he said it, it made you wonder just for a second." She nodded, ashamed. "Baby Mom fought to stay with us. Every treatment, every surgery, every awful day of chemo. She did that to try to stay. The cancer was just stronger than medicine, not stronger than love." "How do you know?" "Because I was there. I saw her fight, and also," he pulled into their driveway. "Come on, I want to show you something." In Rebecca's closet behind the jewelry box was another box. Medical records, treatment plans, clinical trial applications. "Look at all this. 3 different hospitals, 5-second opinions, experimental treatments." She researched everything, tried everything. She even wrote to doctors in Germany about a new therapy. Sophie touched the papers reverently. She really didn't want to leave. No, baby. Leaving us was the thing she feared most. More than dying. Much more. That afternoon, they discovered another treasure in the piano bench. Sheet music for "You Are My Sunshine," simplified for beginners, and a note. Lesson 5, music continues even after the last note fades. Learn this together. Play it when you need to remember that even cloudy days end. Neither of them played piano. Rebecca had been the musician. "We could learn," Sophie suggested hesitantly. "YouTube or—" Matthew remembered something. "Grace mentioned she plays. Maybe she could teach us." Sophie brightened. "Like lessons. If she's willing." Grace was more than willing. She came over that evening, and they spent an hour learning basic notes. Finger positions, the geography of keys. Sophie caught on quickly, her small fingers finding patterns. Matthew struggled, his engineer's brain wanting equations, not art. "Feel it," Grace suggested. "Don't think so much." "Mom used to say that too," Sophie said, when Dad tried to help with her art projects. They managed a clumsy but recognizable version of the first line. It was horrible and beautiful and perfect. Tuesday brought rain again. Sophie came home from school quiet, retreating to her room. Matthew found her there an hour later, surrounded by photos she'd pulled from albums. "I'm forgetting her voice," she said, panic in her eyes. "I try to remember, but it's getting fuzzy." Matthew grabbed his phone, scrolling through videos. "Here, Mom at your birthday last year." Rebecca's voice filled the room, singing "Happy Birthday," laughing as Sophie blew out candles. They watched video after video. Christmas morning beach trips, random Tuesday dinners. Rebecca, a live, vibrant present. "Can we make copies?" Sophie asked. "In case the phone breaks." "We'll make lots of copies. We'll save them everywhere." "Dad, will you forget too?" "Some things probably, but not the important things. Not how she laughed, not how she loved us, not how she made everything an adventure. Even dying." The question took his breath away. "What do you mean, the treasures? She made dying an adventure for us, like she couldn't stay, but she could, might leave us a quest." Out of the mouths of babes, Matthew thought. Wednesday, they faced a practical challenge. Sophie needed new shoes. She'd outgrown her current ones seemingly overnight. Rebecca had always handled clothes shopping. "Do you know my size?" Sophie asked in the shoe store. "We'll measure," Matthew said with false confidence. The sales clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, helped them. "Growth spurt." My mom usually did this, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. She died, Dad's learning. The clerk didn't miss a beat. Well, let's teach her to read. Sir, you want to check the width too, not just length. And always have her walk around, jump a little. Kids need room to grow, but not so much they trip. They left with new sneakers, Sophie wearing them out of the store. In the car, she said, "That wasn't so hard?" "No," Matthew agreed. "We're getting better at this." Mom would be proud. She would. Thursday evening while making dinner tacos, because they'd mastered those, Sophie suddenly asked, "Can we do Thanksgiving?" Matthew's hands stilled. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. Last year, Rebecca had orchestrated a feast for 12 even while on chemo. "Just us," he asked. "Maybe Grace and Ben, and Grandma and Grandpa Mom's parents, I mean. We haven't seen them since the funeral." Rebecca's parents had been devastated, barely functional. They'd sent cards but hadn't visited. "I'll call them," Matthew promised. The conversation was hard. Rebecca's mother cried. Her father's voice shook. But they said yes, they'd come. They needed to see Sophie, to see pieces of Rebecca living on. That night, another treasure, this one in the attic. Lesson 6, traditions matter, but they can change. Keep what serves you, alter what doesn't, make new ones. The love is what matters, not the specific ritual. A photo album labels Thanksgiving through the years, and Rebecca's turkey recipe with annotations. "Matthew, you can do this. It's just a big chicken. Don't overthink." Friday brought the first snow, just a dusting, but Sophie pressed her face to the window in wonder. "Mom loved first snow," she said. "She'd make us go outside, even if it was just flurries." "Then we go outside." They stood in the backyard, faces turned up, catching snowflakes on their tongues. The birdhouse they'd built already had visitors, 2 sparrows investigating. "Mom sent them," Sophie said confidently. Maybe she had. That afternoon, Matthew got a call from Mrs. Patterson, the school counselor. "I wanted to check in about Sophie. Her teacher says she's doing better, participating more. The necklace seems to be helping. She touches it when she's anxious and it grounds her." "Rebecca thought of everything," Matthew said. "She thought of enough," Mrs. Patterson corrected gently. "The rest you're figuring out together. That's what she trusted you to do." Saturday, they decided to tackle Rebecca's garden. It had gone wild in the months of her illness and after, but green shoots pushed through dead leaves. Life persisting. "Should we clear it?" Sophie asked. "What would Mom want?" Sophie considered. "She'd want us to try, but she'd also say gardens are forgiving." They worked side by side, pulling weeds, cutting back dead growth. Underneath, they found crocuses already pushing up, and the lavender Rebecca had planted their first year in the house, woody, but alive. Ben appeared at the fence. "Can I help?" Soon Grace joined them, bringing gloves and tools. They worked mostly in silence, but it was companionable. When they finished, the garden looked loved again. Not perfect, but tended. "Rebecca would be happy," Grace said. "She is happy," Sophie corrected. "Wherever she is." Sunday morning, Matthew woke to find Sophie already up, sitting at the kitchen table with Rebecca's recipe box, organizing cards. "Alphabetical?" he asked. "By meal type, then alphabetical," she said seriously. Mom's system was chaos. He bit back a smile. The label maker would come out next. "Find anything good?" "Grandma Coleman's apple pie. The one Mom made every fall. Could we try?" We could try. The pie was ambitious. The crust fought them, too sticky, then too dry. The apples were cut unevenly. The top crust tore when they transferred it on. But it smelled like heaven, baking filling the house with cinnamon and memory. While it cooled, they found another treasure hidden in the coat closet. Lesson 7, adventure doesn't stop with loss. It changes. Small adventures count. Trying a new food, taking a different route to school, saying yes when you want to say no. Be brave in small ways. A list followed: adventures to try when ready. Camping in the backyard, visiting the city museum's new exhibit, trying sushi, learning to roller skate, road trip to the coast. "Mom knew I was scared to try sushi," Sophie said. "The raw fish thing. We don't have to." "No, we should. Mom was brave about trying things. We can be too." That evening, after a dinner of slightly burned grilled cheese and surprisingly good apple pie, they sat on the couch looking at Rebecca's adventure list. "Which one first?" Matthew asked. "Backyard camping. We have that tent in the garage." "It's November. It's cold." Mom would say that's what sleeping bags are for. She was right. Rebecca would say exactly that. They pitched the tent as the sun set, Sophie directing, while Matthew wrestled with poles and stakes. The November air bit sharp, but they'd layered. Sophie in two of Rebecca's sweaters, Matthew in his old camping gear from college. Mom and I planned this, Sophie said suddenly, spreading sleeping bags. Last summer when she was too sick to actually camp. We made lists of what we'd need, what games we'd play. What games? Shadow puppets with flashlights, ghost stories, but not scary ones. And s'mores, except we do not have a fire pit, so we'll use the kitchen stove. They made s'mores, messily chocolate dripping marshmallows catching fire more than once. The smoke alarm protested until Matthew disconnected it, both of them laughing at the chaos. In the tent, bundled in sleeping bags, they made shadow animals on the tent wall. Sophie's elegant butterfly, Matthew's attempt at a dog that looked more like a mutant rabbit. Dad, Sophie's voice came small in the darkness. Do you think Mom can see us? I don't know, baby. I hope so. Me too. I like thinking she's watching our adventures. What would she say about this one? Sophie giggled. That you put the tent up backwards. The door should face the house. He had put it up backwards. Of course, Rebecca would have noticed. Tell me a ghost story, Sophie requested, but a nice one. Matthew thought. Once upon a time, there was a ghost who loved gardens. She couldn't tend them anymore, not with ghost hands, but she could whisper to the seeds. He wove a story about the ghost helping gardens grow, leaving flower messages for the living until Sophie's breathing deepened into sleep. He lay awake longer, listening to the night sounds, feeling Rebecca's absence like a physical ache, but also feeling something else. Not healing exactly, but the possibility of it. They woke to frost on the tent and Sophie's delighted squeals at their visible breath. Racing inside for warmth and pancakes, Matthew had finally mastered them. They found another treasure taped under the kitchen table. Lesson 8. Holidays will be hard. The empty chair will shout. But fill the space with stories about me, with traditions both old and new. I'll be in the laughter and the tears equally. Thanksgiving approached like a storm system on the radar. Visible, inevitable, potentially destructive. Rebecca's parents called daily with offers to help bring food, handle everything. Matthew appreciated it, but knew this was something he and Sophie needed to own. We're the hosts now, Sophie said seriously, making lists at the kitchen table. Mom always said hosting is about making people feel welcome, not about perfect food. When did she say that? Last Thanksgiving, when she burned the rolls and cried. She said she wanted everything perfect because, Sophie paused, remembering, because she knew it might be her last one with us. Matthew's throat closed. He'd found Rebecca crying over those burned rolls, had held her while she sobbed about failing them, about ruined memories. He'd told her the rolls didn't matter. Now he understood she'd been grieving future Thanksgivings she'd never see. The week before Thanksgiving, they practiced. Turkey breast on Sunday. Overcooked but edible. Mashed potatoes Monday. Lumpy but buttery. Gravy Tuesday. More like sauce soup but seasoned well. Each night they'd evaluate, adjust, improve. Grace offered help repeatedly, but Sophie was determined. We need to do this ourselves first. Then help is okay. Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Rebecca's parents arrived. Matthew watched Sophie run into her grandmother's arms, saw Rebecca in the way she threw herself completely into the hug. Her grandfather stood back, overwhelmed, until Sophie grabbed him too, creating a tangle of limbs and tears. You look so much like her, Rebecca's mother, Linda, whispered. Everyone says that, Sophie replied. I like it. It means she's still here, kind of. That evening, they gave the grandparents a tour of the treasures. Linda cried at each one, touching the notes like sacred texts. This is so Rebecca, she kept saying, teaching until the end. Even after, Sophie corrected, she's still teaching us. Rebecca's father, James, a quiet man made quieter by grief, finally spoke at the seventh treasure. She did this while dying? While living, Matthew corrected gently. She was living until the very end. James broke then, sobbing in a way Matthew recognized, the complete surrender to loss. Sophie climbed into his lap, tiny arms around his neck. It's okay, Grandpa. We're all good. Mom said grief is love, with nowhere to go, so we have to give it to each other. Where had 7-year-old Sophie learned such wisdom? But Matthew knew. Rebecca always. Rebecca teaching through treasures and memories and carefully placed words. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and bright. Matthew found Sophie already in the kitchen, Rebecca's turkey recipe propped against the mixer wearing Rebecca's Kiss the Cook apron that pooled around her feet. "I'm starting the stuffing," she announced. "You do the turkey. We're a team." They worked in synchronized chaos, bumping into each other, dropping things, laughing at their mistakes. The turkey went in an hour late. The stuffing was forgotten on the counter. The pies, store-bought at Grace's insistence, waited safely in the fridge. Linda and James arrived early to help, bringing wine and flowers and hands eager to be useful. Linda took over the potatoes while James set the table using Rebecca's good china, despite Matthew's protests. "She'd want us to use it," James said firmly. "What are we saving it for?" Grace and Ben arrived at 2, bringing rolls and green beans and an energy that shifted the house from mourning to something closer to celebration. Ben had made place cards in art class, each one decorated with hand-drawn turkeys. "This one's for Sophie's mom," he said, placing a card at Rebecca's usual seat. Sophie said she's still part of dinner. The adults exchanged glances, but Sophie beamed. "She is. We're going to tell Mom stories." And they did. As they ate, the turkey only slightly dry, the stuffing actually perfect, the potatoes lumpy, but loved. They shared Rebecca's stories. The time she tried to adopt every dog at the shelter. Her legendary Christmas cookie disasters. How she'd sung opera in the shower badly but with enthusiasm. Remember when she decided to redecorate the bathroom herself? Matthew said, wine loosening his tongue. The great wallpaper incident of 2018. She was covered head to toe in paste. Linda laughed through tears, called me crying, but also laughing so hard she couldn't explain what happened. "I helped her clean up," Sophie added. "We had a paste fight. Dad was so mad about the mess." "I wasn't meant," Matthew protested. "You used your serious voice." Sophie mimicked his deep tone. "Rebecca Ann Coleman, what have you done?" Everyone laughed, even James. The empty chair didn't shout quite so loudly. After dinner, while the adults cleaned, Sophie pulled Ben to her room. Matthew could hear them talking, planning something. They emerged with construction paper and markers. "We're making a thankful tree," Sophie announced, like Mom did every year. Everyone writes what they're thankful for on leaves. They spread supplies on the cleared table. Everyone participated, even Ben, who'd never done this tradition before. Matthew watched Sophie carefully write her leaves in her best handwriting. When they hung them on the paper tree taped to the wall, Matthew read Sophie's leaves, "Dad who tries hard. Grandparents who came. Grace and Ben being friends. Mom's treasures. Burned pancakes that are still good. And on a special silver leaf, Mom watching over us." That night, after everyone left and Sophie was asleep, Matthew sat in Rebecca's chair for the first time since she died. It felt wrong and right simultaneously. He pulled out his phone, finding a voice message Rebecca had left 2 weeks before she died, one he couldn't bring himself to delete. "Hey, love, it's me. Just wanted to hear your voice, but you're in a meeting. Sophie and I are having a good day. We're painting our nails ridiculous colors and eating ice cream for lunch because why not? Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. Also, I love you. In case I don't say it enough anymore, I love you completely. Okay, bye." 23 seconds of Rebecca alive, laughing, normal. He played it 3 times, then put the phone away. Grief was love with nowhere to go. Sophie was right. The next morning brought Black Friday, which Rebecca had always treated as a sport. Sophie appeared at breakfast with a proposal. "We should go shopping, not for things we need, but for Christmas decorations. Mom always bought one new ornament on Black Friday. The crowds will be insane." Mom loved the chaos. She said it was humanity at its most honest, everyone wanting to give perfect gifts. So they went, dove into the mall madness, Sophie holding tight to Matthew's hand. They found an ornament, a glass cardinal, because Rebecca had loved cardinals. Sophie also chose a picture frame ornament, planning to put Rebecca's photo inside. "For the tree," she explained, "so she can see Christmas." December arrived with serious snow. 8 inches overnight, transforming Portland into a winter postcard. School was canceled, and Sophie dragged Matthew outside before coffee. "Snow angels," she demanded. Mom always made the first snow angel of the year. They flopped into the pristine backyard, moving arms and legs, creating a family of angels. Sophie made a small one next to Matthew's larger one, then made a third on the other side. "There," she said, satisfied. Our whole family. They built a snowman next lopsided and leaning but wearing Rebecca's old garden hat and one of her scarves. Sophie gave it a carrot nose and button eyes, then stepped back to evaluate. It needs something, she decided, running inside. She returned with Rebecca's painting apron, tying it around the snowman's middle. Now it's perfect. It's the mom snowman. That afternoon, while soup simmered on the stove, they discovered another treasure in the Christmas decoration boxes. Lesson 9, create magic for each other. The season isn't about perfection, it's about wonder. Be each other's magic makers. A new advent calendar, handmade with 24 little pockets. Each held a tiny scroll with an activity: bake cookies for neighbors, drive around looking at lights, read Polar Express with hot chocolate, give toys to children who need them. She made this. Matthew marveled at the careful stitching, the hand-painted numbers. We made it together, Sophie said. In September, when she was having good days, she did the sewing, I did the painting. She said we'd need structure for December. Even dying Rebecca had been mothering, preparing, loving them forward. The first Advent activity was decorating the tree. They'd bought it the previous weekend, and it stood bare in the corner waiting. Sophie directed placement of every ornament, telling the story of each. The clay handprint from preschool, the Eiffel Tower from Paris, the baby's first Christmas from Sophie's infant year. When they placed the new cardinal at eye level, Sophie said, "Hi, Mom. Welcome to Christmas." The tree was crooked with a bald spot. They turned toward the wall, but it glowed with memory and meaning. School resumed, bringing Christmas concert rehearsals. Sophie had a solo, Silent Night, that she practiced constantly. Matthew heard her in the shower at breakfast while doing homework. Her voice, clear and true, carried Rebecca's musical gift. "Will you be there?" she asked repeatedly. "Right in front. Nowhere else I'd rather be." But the universe tested that promise. The day of the concert, his biggest client had an emergency. A structural failure in a building he designed. He needed to be on site, needed to fix this, needed to go, Grace said when he called her panicking. "I'll record everything. Sophie will understand." But would she? After all his promises about being there, about showing up, he drove to the site, mind racing. The problem was serious but not catastrophic. A contractor's error, not his design flaw. Still, it would take hours to resolve. The concert started at 7. It was already 5. At 6:30, he made a decision that would have horrified pre-Rebecca's death Matthew. He delegated, handed the situation to his senior engineer, left the site. "My daughter has a concert," he explained to the stunned client. "My wife died this year. I promised I'd be there. I'm sorry, but I have to go." He expected anger threats to pull this contract. Instead, the client, a father himself, nodded. "Go, we'll handle this tomorrow." Matthew ran every yellow light parked illegally and slipped into the auditorium just as the lights dimmed. Sophie, scanning the crowd from her place with the second graders, saw him. Her whole face transformed. When her solo came, her voice rang pure and strong. She looked directly at him for the first line, then closed her eyes for the rest, singing to someone only she could see. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Afterward, she flew into his arms. "You came even with work. I'll always come. That's what we do. We show up for each other." Grace had indeed recorded everything, but she'd also done something else. She'd saved the seat beside Matthew with Rebecca's coat and purse as if she'd just stepped out. "She was here," Grace said simply. "I wanted everyone to know." The Advent calendar activities continued. They baked cookies, delivering them to neighbors who'd brought casseroles in October. They adopted a family through the school, buying gifts for children who reminded Matthew painfully of what Sophie could have been without support. On December 15th, they found another treasure, this one, in Rebecca's desk. Lesson 10. The future exists even when I don't. Plan for it. Dream about it. Include me in your dreams. I won't be offended by your joy without me. I want all your joy with or without me. A list followed: dreams for my family. College for Sophie, hopefully art school. Matthew learning to paint. Travel. Paris again, but also Japan, New Zealand, the Northern Lights. Sophie's wedding, outdoor wildflowers, simple dress. Grandchildren, at least 2. Matthew finding love again, someone kind, who gets Sophie, who isn't threatened by a ghost. "She wanted you to fall in love again," Sophie asked, studying the list. "Apparently." Huh. Sophie considered this. That makes sense. You have lots of love. It would be wasteful to not use it. 7-year-old logic, but also perfect wisdom. Christmas Eve arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. They decided on simple, just them, Grace and Ben for dinner, then midnight mass because Rebecca had loved the candlelight service. They cooked together all day, Christmas music playing. Sophie danced in the kitchen, wooden spoon microphone, performing jingle bells, with theatrical flair. Matthew caught himself laughing, really laughing, then felt guilty, then remembered Rebecca's video permission to be happy. Grace and Ben arrived with presents and homemade fudge. Dinner was cheerful, Ben and Sophie disappearing repeatedly to shake presents under the tree. Just one tonight, Sophie begged. Mom always let us open one on Christmas Eve. They agreed on pajamas, new ones Grace had bought both kids. Sophie's had penguins, Ben's had dinosaurs, and they modeled them with runway walks that had the adults crying with laughter. At 11, they walked to church through falling snow. The candlelight service was exactly as Rebecca had loved. Traditional carols, the story of birth and hope, flames passing from candle to candle until the whole sanctuary glowed. Sophie leaned against Matthew during Joy to the World, and he felt it. Joy. Not complete, not without sorrow, but joy nonetheless. Rebecca had given them permission for this too. Christmas morning, Sophie woke him at dawn. Dad Santa came. They'd had a careful conversation about Santa weeks earlier. Sophie had confessed she knew the truth, but wanted to pretend still. For the magic, she'd said. So Matthew had eaten the cookies drunk, the milk left, presents signing from Santa in handwriting Rebecca would have recognized as deliberately disguised. They opened presents slowly, Sophie insisting on recording each one for posterity. Books or art supplies, a new bike helmet for adventures to come. At the bottom of the pile, Sophie pulled out a box Matthew didn't recognize. There's no tag, she said, puzzled. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a locket, silver heart-shaped, clearly old. Inside were two tiny photos, Rebecca and Sophie on one side, Matthew and Sophie on the other. It was your mom's grandmother's. Linda's voice came from the doorway. They stood there, Linda and James having used their spare key. Rebecca wore it as a child. She'd want Sophie to have it. We should have given it at Thanksgiving, but it was too hard, James finished. Everything's been too hard. We're sorry we haven't been here more. You're here now, Sophie said, launching herself at them. That's what matters. Mom always said showing up late is better than not showing up. They stayed for breakfast, Linda teaching Sophie to make Rebecca's grandmother's cinnamon rolls, while James and Matthew assembled Sophie's new bike in the garage. She would be so proud, James said quietly, of both of you. The way you're handling this, honoring her but still living. We're trying. You're succeeding. That afternoon, while Sophie played with Ben in the snow, Matthew found himself in Rebecca's closet again. Not searching this time, just sitting among her things. He pulled out the dress she'd worn to their last anniversary dinner, held it to his face, breathed deep. I miss you, he said aloud. God, I miss you so much, but we're doing it, Becca. We're living. Sophie's incredible. You'd be amazed at her strength. I'm learning to braid hair and make pancakes and be the parent you always knew I could be. We found most of your treasures. They saved us. You saved us. Dad, Sophie stood in the doorway. Are you okay? Yeah, baby. Just talking to Mom. Does she answer by, in a way? Through you, through the treasures, through memories? Sophie crawled into his lap and they sat there in the closet, surrounded by Rebecca's things, comfortable in their shared grief. Want to find another treasure? Sophie asked eventually. The map led them to the basement to a box of Christmas ornaments they'd already unpacked. But at the bottom, wrapped in bubble wrap, was something they'd missed. A new ornament. A photo globe with a picture from last Christmas, all three of them in matching pajamas, Rebecca thin but radiant. Lesson 11. Every ending is also a beginning. This is the end of life as you knew it, but the beginning of life as you'll know it. Different, not less. Changed, not broken. Still full of love, always love. New Year's Eve found them at Grace's house with a small gathering of neighbors. Sophie and Ben had noisemakers and sparkling cider. At midnight, everyone cheered and hugged. Matthew felt arms around him. Neighbors who'd become friends, friends who'd become family. This year will be better, Grace said softly. Not because the grief will be gone, but because you know you can carry it now. Sophie appeared at his side looking serious. Dad, we need to find the last treasure tonight. Mom said the last one was for New Year's Eve. They went home, leaving the party still going. The map showed the final location, their bedroom behind the headboard. Lesson 12, let go to hold on. Let go of guilt, of perfect memories of the way things were supposed to be. Hold on to the love, to laughter, to the knowledge that I am part of you both forever. This isn't the last treasure. You'll find me everywhere, always, in unexpected moments, in ordinary days. Every time you choose joy, I'm there. Every time you comfort each other, I'm there. Every time you're blessed enough to live fully, I'm there. Be brave, my loves. Be brave enough to be happy. With the note was a USB drive labeled Play Me Together. On Matthew's laptop, a video file. Rebecca again, but from earlier, maybe a year ago. She was healthier, sitting in their backyard on a summer day. Hi, my loves. If you're watching this, you've found all the treasures, well, all the planned ones. But here's the secret. There are more, not hidden by me, but by life. You'll find them in Sophie's first day of high school, Matthew, in her graduation, her wedding. You'll find them in your first belly laugh without guilt, in the first time you realize you went a whole hour without thinking of me, not because you've forgotten, but because you've integrated the loss. Sophie, sweetheart, you'll find treasures in every milestone I'll miss, but you'll achieve. Don't diminish your joy because I'm not there physically. I'm in your DNA, your mannerisms, your laugh. I'm there. Matthew, you'll find treasures in love again. Yes, I'm talking about romantic love. You'll feel guilty at first. Don't. Love isn't finite. Loving someone new doesn't mean loving me less. Show Sophie that hearts expand, not divide. Live for me, but more importantly, live for you. Make mistakes, make messes, make memories, make magic. The treasures were never about teaching you to live without me. They were about reminding you that you already knew how. You just needed permission to remember. I love you both beyond words, beyond time, beyond death. Now go, live, be brave enough to be happy. The video ended. Sophie and Matthew sat in silence. Then Sophie said, she was the best treasure hunter ever. She was. Dad, I think we should make treasures for other people now, like hide nice notes for strangers or leave painted rocks for kids to find. Rebecca's legacy of treasures. Yeah, spreading the magic. They stayed up past midnight planning their treasure campaign, where they'd hide notes of encouragement, what they'd paint on rocks, how they'd secretly make others' days brighter. Finally, Sophie yawning, they headed to bed. At her doorway, she turned. Dad, we're going to be okay, aren't we? Matthew looked at his daughter, this brave, brilliant, resilient child who carried her mother's spark and her own unique fire. Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay. Different, okay, but okay. Good, different. Good, different. She smiled, and in that smile, Matthew saw Rebecca, saw himself, saw their future. Uncertain, but no longer frightening. The last treasure wasn't really last. Rebecca had been right about that. They found her everywhere. In Sophie's laugh, in the cardinal that visited the birdhouse daily, in the way strangers sometimes did small kindnesses that felt like messages. January came with resolutions. Sophie's learned to ride her bike without training. Wheels read 30 books, make a new friend. Matthew say yes, more finish the birdhouse village they'd started, take Sophie to see the ocean because Rebecca had loved it. They kept finding treasures, not hidden ones, but the ones Rebecca had predicted. The first time Sophie scraped her knee and didn't cry for mommy, but handled it herself. The morning Matthew made perfect French braids without the video. The day they played Rebecca's favorite song and danced instead of cried. On what would have been Rebecca's 36th birthday, they had a celebration. Not mourning, but celebrating her life. They ate cake for breakfast, wore her favorite color purple, did all her favorite things, visited the art museum, had Thai food for lunch, watched The Princess Bride while quoting every line. She would have loved this, Sophie said, purple frosting on her nose. She would have. Matthew agreed, then corrected himself. She does love this. Because Rebecca was right, she was everywhere. In their courage, their joy, their continuing, in their brave choice to be happy. They were different. They were healing. They were living. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between tears and laughter, between ending and beginning, Rebecca was there, still, always, forever. Their greatest treasure, teaching them that love never really ends. It just transforms. 1 year later, Sophie stood at the microphone, 8 years old now, poised and confident. The school talent show audience waited expectantly. "This song was my mom's favorite," she said clearly. "She died 2 years ago, but she taught me that music continues even after the last note. This is for her and for my dad and for everyone who's missing someone." She began to sing "You Are My Sunshine," her voice pure and strong. In the front row, Matthew watched through tears, wearing the half-heart necklace that matched Sophie's. Beside him, Grace held his hand in friendship and support. Linda and James sat on his other side, Linda recording on her phone. As Sophie reached the last verse, a cardinal landed on the windowsill beside the stage, tilting its head as if listening. Sophie saw it, smiled, and finished the song looking at the bird. The applause was thunderous. Sophie bowed, then ran to Matthew, who caught her in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Mom heard it," she whispered. "She sent the cardinal." "Maybe she did," Matthew whispered back. Later at home, they found a note Sophie had hidden, her own treasure for Matthew. A drawing of their family, all four figures holding hands. Matthew, Sophie, Rebecca, with wings, and a new figure labeled Future Happy. They were still finding treasures. They were still leaving them too. The morning after everything changed had become the morning when everything began.